Welcome everyone to another edition of Play It Through, and on this edition it's Adventures of Rocky and Bullwinkle and Friends for the NES, brought to us by THQ. While Adventures of Rocky and Bullwinkle usually isn't put on the list of worst NES games available, I'd say it definitely deserves to be on there. However, I guess since it was released in 1992, not a whole lot of people remember it during the NES days. Not only does this game have very bland and poor graphics as well as a pretty bad soundtrack, it also has some of the worst programming I've ever seen on an NES game. Here we go with Rocky and Bullwinkle for the NES. And you may be able to tell just from the title screen just how poor the graphics really are in this title. In this game, we have to control Rocky and Bullwinkle as they try to get to the Abominable Mansion in order to collect Bullwinkle's inheritance that apparently he has earned. Thankfully, the game's only 5 levels long, and those levels are going to go by pretty quickly. In the game, you can switch between Rocky and Bullwinkle at any time by pressing the select button, and your main attacks are going to be Bullwinkle's charge, where he can charge forward with his horns, but every time you do that for a few seconds, you end up losing health, so it's really not worth it to stand there and take most enemies out with it. Or you can pick up and use bombs that are laying on the ground to throw at enemies, usually taking 2, 3, or 4 bombs in order to defeat one enemy. For most of the game, I'm going to stay playing as Rocky. The only bad thing though about Rocky is that he can't climb upstairs, so we'll have to switch to Bullwinkle to do that. However, everything else is just much easier to do with Rocky since he has a great jump. While the jump of Rocky does use health just like Bullwinkle's charge, it ends up being a heck of a lot more useful and allows you to jump over most of the enemies throughout the game. Be very careful on the staircases in general throughout the game, and make sure that you're actually on the correct platform. Sometimes you may look like you're on the right spot in order to climb down the stairs, and Bullwinkle will start going down the stairs, however you'll find yourself end up losing a life for some reason. The game is very poorly programmed, and if you don't go down the stairs at just the right exact spot, you'll end up losing a life and not go to the next screen. Right here is probably the hardest part of the whole game for me. Use Rocky, and you actually have to jump avoiding the electrical shocks, and then land on the very top of these saucer-like objects, landing on that little white circular object. If you don't land directly on it, you end up falling through and end up losing a life and have to restart the level. There are a few other enemies besides just Boris and Natasha throughout the game, as we're seeing Natasha for the first time here, and using Rocky we just jump over and get to the end. The other enemies, pretty much ones that are just going to crawl around on the ground, they're going to be easy to jump over. However, there are a few enemies starting in this level that do throw projectiles, and they can be a little bit more tricky to deal with, whether or not they're throwing out throwing knives or using a gun. During this level, you can wait for the train to slowly move across, or you can actually start jumping forward and it makes the train rush ahead. It's pretty poorly done as far as the programming goes, but this allows you to get past the level a heck of a lot quicker than just waiting for it to slowly scroll by. This part is a relatively long section, so you've got to conserve your health just a little bit. Use Rocky's jumping ability every time you see Boris and Natasha fly over, so that you can avoid the bombs and actually go right through them without them blowing up, so that you can avoid taking any damage from those. As far as the other guys go with the guns, just jump right over their head, and since they fire so slowly and it takes a while, you should be able to avoid them. Right here, be very careful, because an enemy will just spawn out of almost nowhere right next to you, so if you're running too fast, the enemy will end up spawning directly on you, and it'll end up hitting you. Use Rocky's jumping ability in order to knock this guy off his platform so he can't fire bullets at you as you jump up, grab the key, and then walk over to the cabin to finish the section. You won't have much health at this point. All you have to do though is avoid Boris for a little bit. If you need to, you can grab some extra health, but you'll probably just end up losing it from Boris's bombs, and just go through the door at the top so that you can get to the next level, completely replenishing your health. This level introduces new enemies that throw throwing knives, as well as this goofy gas-type object, that when it hits you, it'll end up reversing your directions. You'll be seeing these throughout the rest of the game, and they can be a little bit annoying, but as long as you know once you get hit to switch from hitting right to left or left to right, you'll have no problem just continuing on like normal. This area is very poorly programmed because this is one of those areas where if you don't go down the stairs in just the right area, it'll end up messing up. You may notice right there I was a little bit down, and had I pressed down, I would have gone down the stairs but lost a life. I actually had to jump up to get a little bit higher on the same platform, in which case then I could go down the stairs. Pretty much to make sure that you're on the right spot, make sure the guy next to you that's throwing the knives is chucking them at you. If he's throwing knives at you, you're in the right spot so that you can go down the stairs and not end up getting into a pit. I know, it's extremely poorly done, but unfortunately that's just the way THQ decided to make this game. If you have a little life left, just run forward and charge this enemy, and end up getting in front of the castle to complete the stage and go to level 4, once again refilling your health. This level starts off really easily. Just use Rocky in order to fly over all the bouncing red spike balls, until you get to the end where we'll actually have to do a little bit of tricky platforming. Not that this platforming is really a challenge, but in this game, since the controls are very poorly done, you really have to take your time to make sure you don't end up falling into the water. Be sure to grab the key, and then continue on jumping over the rocks so you get to the next section of level. Here we have a forest type area. Be careful while jumping through that you don't land on too many of the enemies and lose health, as well as watch out for the apples or cherries that get dropped from the sky. Thankfully though, that's the end of the level, and now we're in level 5, the final stage of the game. The final stage is actually inside the mansion where we're actually trying to get Bullwinkle's money. On the first level, just run past all the goofy gases as well as jumping over Natasha to go on and get to the next section, the kitchen. In here, there's a very miniature chef that will charge at you. Just keep jumping over them. They're really no threat and don't have any projectiles, so you shouldn't really get hurt by them. The only real threat that you have to deal with is end up getting hit by that gas that reverses directions. On this part, there's a lot of bats, so just keep using Rocky to jump over the first set, and then just walk forward to the left, as the bats will just go overhead, not hitting you. This is the only part where you gotta be a little bit careful jumping over these rocks. When you get over far enough and see a treasure chest, use Rocky's jump ability so you can jump in the air, get past the ghost, and land inside the treasure chest in order to get to the next screen. Here we have a few knights that are going to be throwing some stuff at you, as well as some reversing gas and some of those red spike balls. Just keep walking to the right and jump if you need to, but overall, extremely easy. Here's the last screen of the game. Even if you get hit by the gas, just keep walking forward and force Natasha to keep walking to the right. You won't be able to jump over here. So your real goal is just to keep walking over to the right, making her throw her bombs over you so they don't end up hitting you, and so that you end up staying close enough to her. Just jump over the few other enemies and then bounce her close enough to the wall so you complete the game and get your ending screen. I must say that's probably one of the most stellar endings I've ever seen in an NES title, and then the game goes right back to the beginning so you can start the madness all over again. Adventures of Rocky and Bullwinkle and Friends is easily one of the worst program games, as well as just a completely bland and terrible experience. It really feels like you're playing either a hacked or bootleg game than playing an actual title that was released for the NES. While there's other companies like LJN that made terrible games for the NES, THQ has made some of the absolute worst, with some of the absolute worst graphics, music, and gameplay you can imagine on the system, especially for the games that are being released very late in the NES's life cycle. With that, that's going to wrap up this edition of Play It Through. I'd like to thank you for watching, and of course, I hope you enjoyed.